Hello everybody, welcome to this instruction video. This video is for part 6 of the TLC blanket. In part 6 we're going to learn how to work post stitches, front post and back post stitches, and they give you this beautiful textured pattern. So front and back post stitches are a bit tricky, but once you get the hang of it they give you a lovely effect on your blanket. The yarn that I'm using is still Scheepjes Chunky Monkey, and this week you need a 5mm hook to work the patterns. I'm going to show you this row by row, stitch by stitch, because this really is, well, it can be a little tricky, let me put it that way. So I hope this is a useful video for you. I hope you learn a lot, and let's get started. Row 40, you have color A. I'm going to use color A. Actually, we're going to use color A for the entire part 6, and a 5mm hook, and attach in the first stitch. Now here's that first stitch. Remember we started this stitch with a slip knot already on our hook, so this stitch looks slightly different perhaps. So insert your hook in that first stitch and attach your yarn with a slip stitch. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and now we're going to work a double crochet on every stitch until the end. So yarn over, so this is the first stitch. We're going to skip that because the chain 3 counts as a stitch. Then come to the second stitch and work a double crochet in there. And this is a nice easy round. I'm going to work a double crochet to the other side. And I'll show you this last 2 or 3 stitches as well, but for now work a double crochet on every stitch till you're to the other side. I'm almost to the end, 3 more stitches left, and on those last 3 stitches work a double crochet on every stitch. Just 2, and then here's the last one. I'm going to pull that yarn tail a bit, and 3. And if everything went right, you have 145 double crochets. Leave your yarn attached, turn your work, and then we're going to come back for row 41. Row 41, you have the wrong side of your work facing, and we're going to start with the chain 2. This does not count as a stitch. Now we're going to make the first stitch, and the stitch that we're going to be making in this row is a new stitch. It's called a front post double crochet. I'm just going to take this out. Now every stitch has a post, and the post is the leg. This here is the post. So you see here's the stitch, that's the top of the stitch, that's the little V. And we've been working into that V up till now. We've been working into the top of the stitch. But the stitch also has something here at the bottom, and this bottom bit is called the post. So here you see a post. And depending on how long the stitch is, this post will have a different length. So a single crochet has a different length than a double crochet, for example. Now these are all double, so these posts are nice and long and you can easily work into them. Now we're going to work a front post double crochet. Now that means instead of working into the stitch, we're going to be working around the post of the stitch. And post stitches you can work front post and back post. Now front post means you insert your hook from the front to the back, and then come out the other side and come back to the front. That's how we're going to be working the stitches. I'll show you exactly what I mean. And then later on we'll learn back post stitches. We're going to start with front post. Now we're going to work front post double crochets. So it's a double crochet stitch. That means yarn over for the double. Now this is our first post here. So we're going to work a front post stitch. That means you come around the stitch from the front, going to go to the back, around the stitch, and come out the other side. Then pick up your yarn and bring your yarn completely back to your beginning position. And now it's the same as completing any double crochet. So yarn over, take off 2, and take off the entire stitch, there we go, and yarn over, take off 2. That was your first front post double crochet. I'll show you a few more, don't worry. Yarn over, then come to the next position, front, around, and come out the other side. Pick up your yarn, bring back, take off 2, take off 2. You're going to work a front post double crochet on every stitch until you're to the other side. I'll show you a few more, don't worry. So it's a double crochet, but the beginning is different. So it's yarn over, that's just like a double crochet, but where you insert is different. So the front post stitch starts from the front and finishes it on the front. Pick up your yarn, bring back, and take off 2, take off 2. And that's it. This is a very neat stitch and gives you a lot of texture, because what now happens on the other side of your work, because this is the wrong side, here you don't see a lot, but if you go to the other side, to the right side, you see this little edge here, because what this post stitch does is it turns the top of the stitch, it turns it forward, and that gives you this nice little edge here on the front, and that's really cool. So front and back post stitches are a great way for getting texture in your work. So continue front post stitch till you're to the other side, and I'll show you the last few stitches again just to help you on the edge, because you have the turning chain 3 and that might just confuse you perhaps, so I'll show you that as well. So work a front post double crochet all the way to the other side. I'm almost to the end. I have 5 stitches left, so I'm going to work those last front post stitches around the post of the stitch. Work your front post doubles. This one, and I have 2 left. Stitch here, and here's the chain 3, that's starting chain 3, and also here you work around chain 3. There we go, as though it's a normal stitch. To complete row 42, turn your work, and then we're going to learn back post stitches. Row 42, you have the right side facing, and we're going to start with a chain 3, and this counts as a double crochet. 2, 3. So this is a double crochet, and now we're going to work back post doubles. Let me just open up this loop so I can show you. We learned how to work front post stitches in the previous row. Remember, it was like this around the post of the stitch. Now, a back post stitch is the same idea, but from the back, as the word says. So from the back around the post of the stitch. I'll show you. So this chain 3 counts as your first stitch. So this first post here is already taken care of with that chain 3. And the reason why I've done this is because you can do a back post double around the first stitch, but it's going to require a bit too much maneuverability maybe at this point. So I've chosen to do that as a regular stitch, because it's more about learning the stitches here. Now yarn over, because it's a double crochet, and then around this second post, going to make our first back post double. So come in from the back, so around, and go to the back again, pick up the loop, and then bring everything to where you are now. Sometimes it helps you just fold your work a bit to the front, and then take off 2, take off 2, and that's your first back post double. Yarn over around the next stitch. So you're going to work a back post double around every stitch, and what you'll see what happens is now again the top of the stitch gets tilted forward. So yarn over for the double from the back, around the post, out again towards the back, pick up your yarn, bring it to where you were, your starting position, and then take off 2 loops, take off 2 loops. And this you're going to continue till you're to the other side. I'll show you the other side for sure, because you've got there the starting chain 2, which does not count as a stitch, but it can easily be confused, especially with these front and back post stitches. So I'll just show you exactly which one you should and should not work into. But at this point I want you to practice this back post stitch, because again it's perhaps a bit more difficult than the front post, but it's also important to master this stitch because many designs use back post stitches. So one last one, and then work until you're to the other side. So yarn over from the back, around the post, out towards the back again, pick up the loop, bring to where you are, and then take off 2, take off 2. Now you can see this nice little edge again forming here. You'll see it looks different than the one we did before, but that's okay. It's about the technique that we're learning here. So continue until you're to the other side, work a back post double on every stitch. The last few stitches of row 42. This is a back post stitch, and I've got 3 more to do. You see here's this turning chain 2, and I especially want to show you that you miss it, because you've actually, I'll show you like this, you've got 3 stitches left here. Here's a stitch, here's a stitch, and then here is your last stitch. Let me just get around it. There. Here's your last stitch. And you see there is the turning chain 2. And that's, so you need to miss this chain 2, and this is the last stitch that you're going to work around. So I've got 3 stitches left here. This one is still easy. And this one is also still reasonably easy. And now comes the last one, and it's around, and then kind of in between the stitch and the chain 2 space, insert your hook, and then grab your yarn around that stitch. It might be easy if you just hold on to the chain 2, and then complete the stitch. There you go. And you'll have this chain 2 kind of sitting on top here. Don't worry about it. When we actually come round at the end and make the final border here, we're actually going to work into this chain 2, and you won't even see it's there anymore. That completes row 42. You now have 144 back post doubles, and right at the beginning you have a chain 3 that counts as a double. Turn your work for the next row. Row 43, I'm sure you're going to be very happy with row 43, because after all that hard work with those front post and back post stitches, this is just a row of double crochets. So chain 3, this counts as your first stitch, and then come to the next stitch, your second stitch, and gonna work a double in there, and then work a double on every stitch until you're to the other side. Like I said, this is just a nice relaxed row, double crochet on every stitch, and when you're to the other side, of course the last one is going to be in that turning chain 3 double crochet from the beginning. But I'm sure this will be something that I do believe you'll be able to do quite well at this point. Just a row of double crochets, and I'll just show you the last stitch as well. But work a double crochet on every stitch. Almost to the end of the row. The blanket is really getting bigger, and it's getting more difficult to get it in front of the camera. Last 2 stitches, last 2 doubles, and 2. got 3 more stitches, the 2 full stitches, and here's a turning chain, which also counts as a stitch. And then here's a double, and then here's the chain 3, so insert in the top of that chain, insert your hook in there, there we go, and complete the last double. At this point you should again have 145 double crochets. Turn your work, and in the next row gonna start combining stitches. Row 44 already. I'm going to start with the chain 2. Now this chain 2 does not count as a stitch. Now our first stitch is going to be a front post double crochet. I'm going to yarn over. Now the front post stitch means from the front to the back around the stitch and come out the front again, and then take off 2, take off 2. So that's a front post double crochet. Now we're going to start a small repeat unit of 3 stitches. In the next 2 stitches work a double crochet. Now this here was the first stitch, but we've worked that front post stitch around it, so we're going to come to the second stitch. A double crochet, and also in the next stitch a double crochet, and then in the third stitch a front post double crochet. Yarn over. So that means if this is the next stitch, but work around the post that belongs to that stitch. From the front, work a front post double crochet. And those 3 stitches you're in essence going to repeat until the end. So again, the next stitch. Now this here is the next stitch, because here you have the front post, so you come to the next stitch. That's 1 double, 2 doubles, and a front post around the next. And again, a front post, a double, another double, and a front post. You can see every third stitch is a front post stitch. And now repeat this until the end. I'll show you once more, but you're going to find that rhythm, I'm sure. So it's 1 double, 1 double, and a front post. And especially keep track of the right stitch, that you work the front post around the right stitch. Because if I open up here, it's going to be a double, double, and the front post. And then double, double, and a front post. Continue like this until you're to the other side. I'll show you the last few stitches as well, but it should work out exactly that your last front post double falls in the very last stitch. Continue like this until you're to the other side. 2 doubles and a front post. Almost to the end. I have 6 stitches left, so that means 2 more repeats. That's 1 double, 2 doubles, and on the next stitch a front post double, and here on your last 2 full stitches double crochet on each. So 1 and 2, and here you have the chain 3. You're going to work around that chain 3 as though it's the post of the stitch, and complete your last stitch. Rotate your work, and then we're going to complete the second half of the stitch pattern. Row 45. Now you have the wrong side of your work facing, and we're going to start the second half of the stitch pattern. Start with the chain 3. 2, 3. Now this chain 3 counts as a double crochet. Now we're again going to start a repeat over 3 stitches. The first 2 stitches are going to get a a front post double crochet. So yarn over. So you're going to set the first stitch counts for that double. So you're going to go to the second stitch, work a front post double, and then come, and here's the third stitch. Here you work another front post double around. So now you've worked 2 front post doubles. The next stitch you're going to work a double crochet, and if you look at it from the front, this is the front post stitch from the previous row. So in the front post stitch you work a double crochet. So that's always a checkpoint for you. This double crochet should be in the front post stitch from the previous row. And these 3 stitches you're going to repeat until you're to the other side. Again, it should work out exactly. So that's a front post stitch. So that's 1. And then this is 2. And then work a double. And I'll show you again. So it's 2 front post stitches and then a double. So it's a front post stitch around the doubles, and it's a double in the front post stitches. And a double. And if you look at it from the front, you'll start seeing the stitch pattern from the front. But I'll show you the repeat once more, and then you continue like this till you're to the end. So in the first stitch, front post double. In the second stitch, a front post double. And in your third stitch, which is a front post stitch, work a double crochet. Now continue these 3 stitches, repeat till you're to the other side. Almost to the end of the row, and as you can see I have 6 stitches left, and those are the exact 6 stitches that I still need to work. So 2 more repeats. So a front post double, a front post double, and in the next stitch a normal double. And here are the last stitches, and you see here's that turning chain 2. I'm just going to be mindful of that. It's a front post double, a front post double. And if you look here now, you see you've got the turning chain, which is here, and here to the front you've got the stitch. Now be sure to just work into the stitch, and it might be slightly hard to get into that stitch. There we go. So working into the stitch, and here's the chain 2. You're going to ignore that. There we go. And that completes the row. So on the front you'll really start seeing your stitch pattern emerging. Turn for the next row. Rows 46 and 47 is actually a repetition of the last 2 rows, so rows 44 and 45. We're going to do them again. as such, you should be able to do these without me because we've done them before, but I do know that these rows are a bit tricky, so I am going to show them to you again. But at the same time, I encourage you to use the written pattern to learn to read the pattern and relate that to the stitches that you're making. We're going to start for row 46 by repeating row 44. 44 starts with a chain 2, which does not count as a stitch. So that means our first stitch is going to be around this, our first stitch there, because we're working a front post double. So yarn over, round stitch, pick up, take off 2, take off 2. Your first front post double. Now we're again going to start the repeat with those 3 stitches. So double crochet in the first 2 stitches. So this is a double, it's 1 double, and a second double, and in the third stitch again a front post double, and the third stitch is going to be the double crochet from the previous row. And these 3 stitches you're going to repeat until you're to the other side. And what you'll see happening is you'll see this line forming here. You see here was the front post stitch, you see they're lining up. I'll show you the repeat again. So in the next 2 stitches work a double. It's 1, 2, and then the third stitch here. Work a front post double. Okay, now you can really see the stitches aligning, and that's exactly what you want. We're going to be making these little holes here, and I just really like this stitch pattern. So again, this is a perfect stitch pattern to learn front post stitches, back post stitches. We're going to work back post stitches again a bit later on. And again a front post stitch. So work this repeat, so 2 doubles and a front post until you're to the end. Just again the last few stitches of the row. Got 2 more repeats left. So it's a double, double, and a front post. And then a double, a bit more yarn, double, and this is the last double. And here's the chain, it's the starting chain, which also counts as a stitch. So around that stitch you make the last front post stitch. There we go. Turn your work for row 47. Row 47, again a repetition of row 45. So I'm going to start with a chain 3, 2, 3, and this counts as a double crochet. So this first stitch is taken care of. So then on the next 3 stitches going to work again a small repeat. Start with a front post double crochet on the first 2. So yarn over, first stitch, post double, and the second stitch a front post double, and then here in the third stitch double crochet, and that double crochet is in the post stitch, the front post stitch from the previous row. And again repeat these 3 stitches till the end. So a front post stitch, 1, and another front post stitch, 2, and then a double crochet. Two repeats. Show you once more, and then repeat till the end. Front post double, 1 front post double, 2, and then a double crochet. And repeat this pattern till the end. show you the last few stitches of this row again. So I have 2 repeats left to do. So the first 2, again back post, back post, these are front post double crochets and a double, and then on the last repeat again the 2 front post stitches, and then here you have that turning chain which could again throw you for a loop, so I'll just show you that again. But this is the same as we've done before, but still it could be so confusing. 2 front post stitches, and here you see the chain 2, and if you just pull that open you see the little gap there, that's the stitch where you want to go into, and work a double crochet. And then you've got the turning chain 2 here that you're just going to ignore, and there's the actual stitch. And that completes row 47 already. Turn your work. Row 48, again a nice easy row. We're going to work a row of double crochets. Starting with a chain 3, which counts as your first stitch. So you're going to move to the second position. My blanket is getting really thick. There we go. Go to the second stitch, work a double crochet, and you're going to work a double on every stitch till you're to the other side. So this is a nice and relaxed row. Just stitch by stitch work all your doubles in each and every stitch. So it doesn't matter if it's a front post stitch or whether it's a normal double crochet. You just work a double on every stitch until you're to the other side. And 3 stitches left, so I'm working those last 3 double crochets. So this was a nice easy round, just a double crochet on every stitch. Oh, and there I split my yarn. Happens sometimes. And you have the last stitch here. This is a turning chain, so you also need to work into that because this is counted as a stitch. So in the top of that chain 3, insert your hook and work the last double crochet. There you go. Turn your work. Row 49, you have the wrong side facing, and you're going to repeat row 41. Now what was row 41? If you look back on the pattern, you'll see it's a row of front post double crochet stitches. We're going to start with a chain 2. Now this does not count as a stitch, so that means around our first stitch we need to work the first front post double. So yarn over, coming around the stitch, work the first front post double, and then the second stitch, work the second. And this is going to be very easy round because there's no changing stitches. Every stitch is the same. So work a front post double crochet around every stitch until you're to the end. The end of part 6, you'll be very familiar with the front and back post stitches, and that's exactly the goal of this part. So continue, work a front post double crochet in every stitch till you're to the end. Again, the last few stitches of the row, front post double crochet on the last 3 stitches, and here you have the turning chain 3. Just going to work around that chain for the final front post double. There you go. Turn your work for the next row. Row 50, going to have the right side facing, and for this row we're going to repeat row 42, and that's going to be a row of back post double crochet stitches. Just need to move my blanket a bit. Now the first stitch of row 42 was a chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and this counts as a stitch. So then all the next stitches are going to be back post double crochets. Yarn over, and then around the second stitch, so this is the first one, this is the second, around that second stitch from the back, work a back post double crochet, and then the second one around the next stitch. These back post stitches are just slightly more tricky than the front post stitches, but it's important that you master these stitches as well. And continue and work a back post double crochet on every stitch so you're to the other side. So around this post of the stitch from the back, complete the stitch. There we go. So work a back post double crochet on every stitch. Again, just the last few stitches, because here you have that turning chain 2 again. I'm going to work, this is a normal back post double, and here's a back post double, and here there's a turning chain 2. You're going to insert around the stitch, and that means going through, like kind of the space. I'll show you again. So around the stitch, kind of through the space between the stitch and the chain 2. Grab your yarn and complete the back post stitch. And there we go. And that completes row 50. Row 51, again, wrong side facing, and you're going to work a row of double crochets. So chain 3 for the first stitch, 2, 3, this is your first stitch. Then in the second stitch, work the first full double crochet. So not in this first, but in the second. And then again, this is a nice and relaxed row. See in the second stitch there. Nice and relaxed row. Work a double crochet on every stitch till you're to the other side. And then you've learned a lot this week, really. These front and back post stitches, I'm sure they took some energy from you. Now work a double crochet on every stitch till you're to the other side. Just the last few stitches of the row, a few more doubles to go. That's 1, 2, and this here, the third one, the last one here is in a chain 3. Just poke your hook in there somewhere, and there we go. We're all done for this week. You're going to leave your loop attached, so leave this loop. I'm just going to open this up slightly, and I'm actually going to grab the stitch marker that's marking the front of my work, because I do believe at this point it's rather clear what is the front side and what is the back side. And I'm just going to hook the stitch marker in that loop, and that'll secure my loop until next week. At this point, let's look at yarn tails. So here's your work slightly more from a distance. You can really nicely see the stitch patterns that we've worked. Regarding yarn tails, I expect you'll have a few tails to the back, because where you had to join a new ball, these yarn tails and actually all the other yarn tails from this part are actually very easy, because you've only got one color. So work them in the back of your stitches exactly the way that you've learned to work them in previous rows. So work these yarn tails into the back, and then you're all done for this week. If we look at the size of your blanket, the length of course hasn't changed. It's still 125 centimeters, and your width at this point is about 65 centimeters, give or take. You'll notice that this fabric is very stretchy. You can easily make it a bit larger if it'll be a bit contracted, and that's normal for this stitch pattern. So if you want to just fold it out a little bit, it's about 65 centimeters, give or take. But that brings us to the end of part 6. You've learned a lot in this part already, and next week we're going to do even more. So we're going to start working popcorns. I hope to see you then.